Started. Right, welcome everyone. Today is Tuesday, September 2nd. Yes, we are in the fall. This is the San Rafael City Council Finance Subcommittee meeting. And I will ask for approval of the minutes. Wow, this has gotten really formal with the minutes. Look at this leveling up. Councilmember, do you have any changes or additions to the minutes?
No changes to the minutes.
Okay, I guess all in favor of approving? Aye.
Aye.
I'm gonna do a motion anyway, okay. We have open time for public expression. That's with anyone who's members of the public that are in the room are welcome to address the committee. Not seeing anyone, we will jump right into the key point, which is the Park Impact Fee Program. Turn it over to City Manager, Director Mazio. All right, kick us off.
Are you starting?
I can start.
Or it's Selena, is it you?
Yes.
Great.
You didn't realize we were gonna get right there in 1 minute, did you?
No, she's ready. She's ready.
I just think I need to upgrade a panelist. Let me stop sharing 1 moment, sorry.
She should be there.
Actually, yeah, they are there. I just don't know how to add them as a.
Let me see about over on the screen. Right.
So we have Megan Burke, who's our legal counsel, who's been supporting this project,
Okay.
tons of experience on these items. And so we did want to make sure she was available for this.
Participants, like click the, yeah, that's. And then on the right, attendees,
Debbie too.
yeah.
Do you also have to add, can talk or no? Oh, maybe that's done when you. Let's see, promote it, okay.
You're joining us panelists.
Oh, great.
There we go.
Okay. Hi, Megan.
Hi, welcome Megan.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone.
Oh my God. Think we're good.
So just as brief introductions, Megan Burke, as I mentioned before, she's been supporting city staff and city attorney's office and review of the park fee updates, along with Debbie Kern from Kaiser Marston as the report author. So they're both here and they give us some flavor and stuff. Should there be any questions related to the approach and tact on this?
Great, fantastic.
All right, let's jump right in.
Okay.
There we go. All right, so the purpose of this park impact fee update is to really update fees that have been on the books since the 1970s and 80s. This is one of the first phases of updating our citywide development impact fees to update 3 major fees in the book, which includes our traffic mitigation, our housing, and parks and rec. And then in addition, there will be consideration of public safety impact fees, but that will be included as well. And then it also reflects a statewide trend of revising fees across jurisdictions and Bay Area as well. And that's amidst like housing, pro-housing laws that have come into into effect as well. So that's really streamlining this. And for jurisdictions who have, more, less or not been less development or had less development in the community, they're now relooking at the fees to make sure that those align with the developments that are coming into the city. So this update also ensures that legal compliance is followed with the new development for, sorry, let me just push this down. Okay, ensures legal compliance and makes sure that new development pays for their fair share of the growth. And then it also aligns with the 2023 Parks and Rec Master Plan, which the council identified strengthening long-term sustainability through updated financing strategies. So a little bit of background on the development impact fees. They're legally authorized funding tools to allow for public facilities and infrastructure that jurisdictions use across the state. And they must be legally supported by a nexus study. And that ensures that it shows the evidence-based link between growth and new impacts. So those are governed by the Mitigation Fee Act and the Columbia Act, ensuring that growth pays for impacts of growth. So there are 2 development impact fees for parks on the books for the city of San Rafael. The first one is the Park and Recreation Facilities Fee. That was adopted back in 1971 under the Mitigation Fee Act, and it's currently codified as Chapter 3.24 in the Municipal Code. It authorizes local jurisdictions to impose development impact fees to fund public facilities and infrastructure needed to serve new development. So this is essentially a really older fee on the books. It's a minimal fee, and it's about $30 to $75 per bedroom or new converted room or mobile space. The other fee on the books is the park dedication and in lieu fee. So this is pursuant to Chapter 15.09 of the Center of Municipal Code. It was adopted in 1989, and it is regulated under the Quimby Act, which is also known as the Quimby Act fees. This allows local jurisdictions to require the dedication of land or payment of an in lieu fee for the development of neighborhood or community parks. So this formula is a little more trickier. And you can see in that bullet point right there under that label, it's really a formula based. So it takes into consideration the number of dwelling units, and you multiply that by the population per dwelling unit, which is identified in the Center of Municipal Code as 2.5. And then you times that by 3 acres per 1,000, which is the service standard also identified in the municipal code. And then you multiply that by the fair market value of a buildable park acre plus 20% minimum improvement cost. So the city currently has a 1980s resolution that identifies that fair market land at around 218,000. But that's very low compared to nowadays real estate market. So we, for assumptions, use 2.6 million, which is identified in part Nexus study. And also last year, the city commissioned a real estate appraisal for buildable park acre land, and that came around the same value of 2.6 or higher. So if we use 2.6 at that plug-in rate, it puts out about 23,500 per unit. So the bottom line here, if you were to apply your fair market value at 2 million, that would be about 18,000 per unit. 4 million would be about 36,000 per unit, and then 6 million at 54,000 per unit. So it's very variable depending on what the fair market rate is at that time. And it's been a little challenging to convey to developers what the city's current, park impact fees are right now, because that is such a low number. So if council, decides at this time that they want to, in the future, bring back this item at a later time, I think staff's recommendation would be to update that 1980s resolution from 218,000 to current land standards today. So around 2.6 million or higher, depending on, what the appraisals look like and current values. All right, so with the study, it updates the methodology. So in accordance with Assembly Bill 602, the study uses the existing inventory replacement cost method. So under this approach, essentially the cost of facilities to serve new development is calculated based on the cost to replace the city's existing inventory of parks and recreation facilities for the city's existing population. So the study identified the city's current level of service is 1.824 acres of parkland per resident, per 1,000 residents. But the general plan does identify 3 acres per 1,000 residents, but this is lowering it ensures that new development won't be funding any deficiencies currently that is with the 3 acres. So in accordance with the new state law, the Nexus study establishes fees that are proportional based on units square footage. So the goal of the study is to establish the maximum legally supportable fees under the Mitigation Fee Act and ensures that costs are distributed fairly so growth pays for growth. So as part of the Nexus plan, the city is required to create a capital improvement plan to adopt with the Nexus study. So to meet the capital improvement plan requirements, staff from Parks and Rec and Community Economic Development and the City Attorney's Office reviewed projects identified in the city's Parks and Recreation Master Plan, as well as planned park capital improvements to identify those projects that would be eligible for this funding, which would include parks and community center renovations, new amenities, and land acquisitions. So these projects are those that are impacted or necessitated by new growth, so new facilities, expanded facilities, etc. There are other capital projects in the Parks Master Plan, but those only identified in the study were deemed eligible for this funding. So estimated costs for identified projects do exceed 113 million based on current construction pricing, with the cost attributable to new development being approximately 110 million, which exceeds the total revenues identified in the Nexus study, which is 63 million. So Kaiser Marston surveyed park impact fees levied by other cities within Marin County and other Bay Area jurisdictions. So the park and recreation development impact fees of peer jurisdictions are summarized here. So the fee level that most appropriately that can be compared across jurisdictions is the parkland and recreation facility impact fees for non-subdivisions. So at the top, you'll see the proposed rate for park and recreation facility impact fee for non-subdivision for San Rafael. That's the maximum that could be adopted, but also that is, if you multiply that by a standard square foot average unit of 2,300, which is identified in the study as well, that comes out to about 22,900. And then for multifamily, that square footage is lower, and that's about 20,500. But you can see in some of the years that these Nexus studies were adopted, they're a little older. And so staff is also still trying to verify some of those other jurisdictions that don't have the years up there. But you can see that these fees were recommended on a unit basis, which is supposed to be identified on a square footage basis. So that also tells us that they're a little older as well, that don't currently are in standard with the Nexus study requirements. All right, so these are the maximum fees per the Nexus study that the city can adopt for at 100%. So on the top, you'll see the Parkland and Recreation Facility Development Impact Fee for non-subdivisions. At 100% that rate for single family detached, it would be recommended on a fee per square foot basis. That's at $9.98. And then for multifamily, it's at $18.50. For recreation facility development impact for residential subdivision, at 100%, that would be 4.5 for single family and 8.35 for multifamily. And then on the bottom, you have your parkland dedication in lieu fees for residential subdivision. And those are recommended on a per unit basis. It doesn't have to be on a fee per square foot basis. All of these fees here do include a 2% administrative allowance as well. So to demonstrate what you just saw on the last screen for the practical effect of these proposed fee increases, we wanted to show sort of an illustrative example of the total development costs at the maximum fees. So this is just based on like one unit cost. So if you were to multiply these by a 50 unit project or 100 project unit, that's what it would apply to. So for the middle column right there, the subdivision total fee per unit, subdivisions will be required to pay the parkland dedication in lieu fee, which is based on that flat fee, and then a recreation facility development impact fee, which is based on the per unit square foot. So you multiply that to get that per unit cost. So for non-subdivision, those are right there as well. So that would be a fee per unit also. So the simple math is right there. It's basically your flat unit for the park dedication in lieu, and then your calculation for the recreation development impact, same here, and then same right there as well. So if you take a look at your subdivision for single family and your non-subdivision for single family, it's generally around the same price, so about $22,009. And then for multifamily, if you take a look at your subdivision project, $3,500, and then also non-subdivision, it's around the same price as well. So that's to make sure the impact is the same regardless of the project, to make sure that they're both funding parks and recreation facility and parkland dedication, so that regardless of the project type, it's equitable. All right, so today we are looking for some input from this council subcommittee. So really input on the adoption of the updated fees. For the traffic mitigation fee, it was adopted on a phase-in. I don't remember exactly where it started, but it was over, I think, a 3 to 5 year period. But we're looking for some insight at if the subcommittee is interested in starting on a phase-in approach, at what percentage or what number we're comfortable at. And then also if there's any insight to adopt at the maximum rate fees. And then in addition to that, if council or the subcommittee is more interested in taking a holistic approach with all of the development impact fees and taking this at a future date, staff would like to recommend the potential for a resolution to update that 1980s resolution, which identified that 218,000 buildable acre, to update that to today's land values so that we can take care of development coming in and then also take a holistic approach if the council would like to for all fees.
All right, well.
So lastly, all right, one more slide I forgot. Next step, so whatever feedback we receive today, staff will be coming up with the recommendation, and then we'll also reach out to additional developers to have additional outreach and conversations with them to see how they're feeling on those fees as well before bringing it back to you guys, whether that's another subcommittee meeting or a council meeting. And then after adoption, once it gets to that council point, it will be incorporated into the master fee schedule, and then it'll be effective 60 days after adoption. And then one important thing to note, projects that have already gone through the entitlement process or have vested rights, so they remain subject to the current fees on the books. And then for future considerations, we'll be coming back with additional nexus studies for that traffic mitigation fee, affordable housing, and then a potential new public safety facilities impact fee. All right, that concludes my presentation.
Okay, questions and conversations. I have one starting question, then go back and forth. So on the slide that talked about the comp cities, you had a little asterisk about when the nexus study was provided. Does the nexus study have to be done within a certain time frame in order to modify the fees? Like, does that have to be within 5 years or 10 years or something like that?
They are supposed to be updated, I believe, on a 5 to 8 year basis, but that may be a Megan question.
So I'm just trying to think the legality, like we want to have.
I think it's a question.
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, Megan.
Hi, yeah, so beginning with new legislation, any fees that are adopted or updated after, I believe it's January 1, 2022, then have to be legally updated every 8 years.
Okay.
So for your older fees, you that clock doesn't really start running until you update them now. And then future updates would have to be done every 8 years. But generally the best practice is to do it every 5 years. Otherwise they start to get out of date and they're not fully capturing costs.
Right. The situation that we're in right now. Basically.
Right, exactly.
I have some other kind of broader questions, but why don't we, what do you have for questions?
Yeah, I have 4 questions.
Yeah.
So one, I'll start with the broad first. So in the last slide before this one where it just says questions, there was several fees that we're considering at the same time. And I'm just trying to think through the journey in the balance of the developer, what they're trying to do, which is they want a consistent process. They have to be able to determine what is their break-even line, their profit line. Obviously, this is going to factor in as a developer approaches the city, but we also want to balance that with making certain that our future needs and growth needs are being met. So I am curious, because taken on its own could be one thing. I just want to make certain we're able to time these and make certain that there's a predictability. So I know it's a bigger question, which is, if we make a decision on this, would we not want to integrate it with the timings of when we're going to contemplate the other stuff around public safety? Is there
And can I add on to your question? Because I think I totally agree that is what we need to be thinking about. And would staff recommend almost bifurcating? So we're doing the ones that are existing now. So we're basically addressing what's here and now, and then maybe having a slightly different strategy for the future. Because I worry if we're trying to get all the future stuff now, it's going to make it really complicated for the current projects there. So I'm curious about staff's input.
Yes, so I'd answer to start on this is yes and yes. So what I mean by that is, yes, we need to have or establish what the current fee structures are, and that's been really kind of the struggle as we're coming through here. The other thing that's adding to the complexity of this is the vesting rights of developers. With the new state laws and the SB 330 language, the second they make a preliminary application, a formal application, they vest the fee structure that's in place at the time. So as we talked about the pipeline, the current pipeline we're dealing with for all these projects and units, they vest into like when they actually made those applications. So they wouldn't be subject to any of these changes. However, there is one piece of this is the park and lieu fees for subdivisions, because they vest it into a formula. So that's why establishing, well, what is the formula? Because that makes it really hard for staff to answer the question of, well, it's based on fair market value. It can range anywhere from 20,000 to 60,000. So that's why getting clarity of really the council adopted, this is the fair market value of park land asset. So that's one thing that is one of the asks that we have today. The other thing too is really about a comprehensive view, because really the developers, they look at, there's a bottom line to this, right? So there's only so much they can pay for a certain value property. There's profit margins of the pieces. They really don't care how you apply it. They just know it's a cost to them. So really it is up to, and this council kind of set really what do we value most? Is it parks? Is it public safety? Is it traffic? We're just trying to update at least our current ones to be compliant with state law. So that's why we kind of see the load of like, why are we doing this from first? Because this one's the one that's been the hardest to calculate. The next one's gonna be traffic that likely this committee will see is the traffic mitigation fees. Now, if you recall, we actually adopted updated traffic mitigation fees as part of the general plan. However, state law changed recently where they said, oh, by the way, you can't do it by unit count, you gotta do it by square footage. So we actually have a consultant, Public Works, working on this to convert what we adopted and convert it to square footages. So that's what will likely come back. And then there's the other fee that we're actually pretty good shape on, which is our commercial linkage fee. If you recall, council just saw that not that long ago. We have it updated Nexus study. We're not making any changes to that at this time. But then there's the third fee, or the newest one we're trying to contemplate, which is a public safety impact fee. And that's the fee that we're actually looking at the full fee burden on. And then at that point, we can try to readjust to say, okay, what is the full fee burden? What is the right mixture for this? So that's actually slated in that consultant scope of work. And we're anticipating sometime in the first quarter, January, February, March of 26 for bringing that back to council. But we have immediate questions we're trying to answer. We have developers who are actually in the queue now asking these very specific pointed questions.
So the holistic, just to make sure I understand, well, in January, so yes to the holistic, in January, you'll look at that and see how they all, you have the total number, then how it all breaks out underneath that. And that's a future discussion.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry.
No, it's good. Not at all.
If I just add one thing, and Paul, I'm gonna just cue you in here because I think you brought this up a few times. Just to add on to what Micah was saying, as we consider striking the balance between making sure we can plan for a future where we know there's going to be not insignificant population growth, but also trying to meet the developers where they are to make sure these projects can actually get built. As we're bringing these forward incrementally, these fees, staff are looking at the collective total fee load, and we'll be taking that into consideration. To Micah's point, we want to get the clarity to the developers so they know, but we need these nexus studies, which take a minute to complete. So what staff will do is, as for example, the traffic mitigation fee comes forward and we're studying the public safety impact fee, we will look at that total fee burden, and staff may say to the council, maybe we phase something like a park impact fee in over a longer period of time in recognition of that total fee load. Like in a perfect world, if we had all these nexus studies done at one time, we would have all that data to give you now, but we feel like it's important to move this one forward. And then we can consider discounting them as we get the total package together. Does that make sense?
It does.
Did I say that
Yeah.
accurately? Anything to add on that?
Yeah, so let me reflect back what I heard, because I heard one thing earlier, which was entitlement means vested, but it actually means once you get your pre-app in, that freezes the fees and the laws where they were at the time of that pre-app, not even the app or even the entitlement. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. So hearing that, it goes to I'm trying to think through, I just want to make sure, and it's connected to what you just said, Christine, which is when a developer comes in, they say, okay, now I have a predictable, I'm just walking through a counterfactual. So a developer comes in and says, okay, great. Now I have a clear sense of what my fees are. And now I'm going to contemplate a project and I'm gonna say, okay, what is my profit line? My biggest concern is that if we go too fast, and I appreciate the notion of the option of phasing, is that they're gonna say, okay, well, I want to build, and now the state is giving me all sorts of abilities to build higher.
Yep.
And I can just add more floors so I can make more profit. I think the balance that I think is in front of us here is we want to make certain we can capture as much fee as allowed for us so that we can build facilities for the population that we're expecting for all those folks. But if we charge too aggressively, I can also, I'm making this up in my mind, or I'll let staff to give me the feedback on this, is would we then have developers to say, okay, fine, you're going to charge me a lot more. I'm going to create buildings that are a lot more tall on the limited land that I have on the infill. Is that the right knob? Is that knob real? So in other words, in an extreme case, would we have lower fees and the developer might say, okay, well, I can get to a profit line anyway, or they'll just build anyway, make a lot more profit. We don't have any governing ability to limit how much profit they can make.
I think it's striking the balance of transparency. And this is the hardest part that we always find is developers move forward with a project, but then they had the wrong inputs or they didn't quantify fee. And it's not just the city fees. It's the utility districts, it's PG&E, it's other factors that come into play for them. It's the construction markets, it's the labor markets, it's the lending market that make projects financially feasible. And so with our limited levers of the pieces we control, this is the areas we have on fees. But then there's a reflection of the fees, and this is why I think this report was really important to do, is really it's like kind of like building into the infrastructure, right? This is the infrastructure of our park systems, right? Kind of the backbone of our community, our parks and recreation facilities. This is a developer's fair share impact on what that development brings. When they bring those households, this is the level of impact they have on our parks infrastructure. So we have called out, at least at the maximum level, this is the maximum legal justifiable fee. The real question though is at what point, what level would council like to apply that fee? But it's critical to have because we've not had it at this level. So
I was saying Megan might have some insights, but to specific to your question, I'm not sure that a heavy fee burden would mean incentivize a developer to go vertical because they're paying based on the square foot and the units. What's happened in the past that some of these studies try to address is the mix of housing, because the more expensive or the closer they get to market rate plus of the product, then the fee's a smaller portion of the cost. The more you're building the type of housing that you're trying to get built, the more the fee becomes a bigger share. So it can impact the mix of housing. Not so much just the.
No, it's super helpful. Yeah, it's square footage, not.
Yeah.
Okay. And I have a couple more, but we go back and forth. I wanted to, because I have a couple more.
No, keep going.
So, thank you. I read in there, and this is more that I don't know how it's applied when we say we cannot fund existing needs. How does that show up? Because I can imagine we take any park. So for example, not that long ago, we saw the a master plan for the Terra Linda. So we wouldn't be able to discriminate and say, well, only the new people can go to this facility and old people can't go to the facility. So how does that actually show up in terms of how it's applied?
Well, not how it's applied, but also how it's calculated. So in the analysis that they do, they project what the population growth will be and anticipated development and population density. And so that factors in. So the methodology that they use factors that in. And so that we are anticipating applying it to new development rather than retrospectively towards existing development. So it's kind of baked into the formula, but to your point, no, we can't discriminate and say, hey, like when did you move here? But again, it's baked into the methodology, the population growth, the projected number of units and things of that sort goes into the calculations, if that makes sense.
But can you also argue that by increased population, the current facilities are going to see more wear and tear and more use? I mean, so it's not just expanding them, it's
Right.
actually the
Maintaining service levels.
It's about maintaining service levels, and what was not mentioned but was kind of implied by Micah's comments is that if we don't collect the maximum fee, then what we're doing is either subsidizing through the general fund or subsidizing through existing property taxes maintaining a service level, which we know because there's going to be more demand with more people, is not sustainable.
I think just to add to your question, there's also like the equity component around like citywide where our parks are available. And as population grows, making sure that the green space, recreation space is adequate also in different areas of the city. That's something that we're looking at now. There are lots of neighborhoods that would like to have another park. And like geographically having them be dispersed throughout the city is also an important consideration because it's not all same now, right? So I think that's just another thing that we're taking into consideration and looking at the global. But to your point, the fees would cover things like we'd need to hire more maintenance workers. We'd need to have more equipment if we're maintaining more parks. And so there's not I think that, we told the council that Terra Linda enhancement project, there's no funding available at all for that project. So again, it's maintaining service levels, which is what the Nexus study justifies for us, but then there's the increasing the service levels due to the population growth. So we're trying to do both of those things. We can't do both with impact fees, obviously, without the justification of the Nexus study, but it's a complicated equation as Paul and I talk about the next 20, 30 years, trying to plan for what this is actually going to look like when these people are here living in these spaces with such a long history of very, very slow growth. It's a really big long-term financial puzzle that we are actively trying to solve in a number of different ways, but it's just something that we can't just think about in the here and now.
Right, yeah, and I think where I was going with that specific example, I know we're not trying to get too specific, but I'm trying to contemplate that the major centers of, we'll call it, say, multifamily development are going to be more in the downtown area and Northampton, recent examples. And so would we imagine that for capital allocation to accommodate that, we might say, okay, well, at least for park capital spend, we might see the more geographically proximate parks to the development, or I'm just trying to imagine how we say, well, that goes into a special fund that goes towards capital improvements.
We just used our park and rec plan. I mean, that geographic was
Right.
one of the factors. So I would say, no, we wouldn't say that because we're doing the development here, you get the money. I think it's using that other process that we created the plan.
Yeah, and that would happen also through the annual budget
And
process.
Okay.
in CIP.
this may speak to your point, but there's a list of projects that are in the capital plan, the park master fee, that were used as the basis for the fee. As those fees are being collected, the city is not legally restricted to spend that money on that list.
Mhm.
So it's really meant to be
Global.
reasonable, it makes sense, but then the decisions are made by the council. based
It's
on
really more
the-
about just population growth. We don't have to get it to geographic proximity.
I wanted to go to-
Just
Oh,
one,
go
I,
ahead. Yeah,
yeah,
please.
can I jump in really quickly
Yeah,
here?
no, please do.
One caveat to that is that the fee that's charged to subdivisions, so the parkland dedication and then in lieu fee, generally has a little bit stricter requirements on how you spend the revenues. It usually has to be spent on a park that will serve the subdivision. That's not defined, but usually we say, okay, if you're spending it on a neighborhood park, then the subdivision that paid the fee should be in that vicinity of what a neighborhood park is defined to serve. If you're spending it on a citywide park, then that's okay because that is designed to serve the whole city community. But most of your revenues are probably going to be brought in by the park impact fees, which are just charged to any non-subdivision development. And as everyone said, those can be spent anywhere in the city. So that is the general rule. It's just a little bit stricter when it comes to the revenues from subdivisions.
Thank you. Thank you. I wanted to build on something that Angela said, because I thought is really important, which is the whole idea about subsidizing. And I think when this comes to the council, and I wanted to make the underscore what Angela just said, the policy decision is how much do we want the general plan or the city subsidizing? Because we already know we can go 22,000 or whatever that max is if you're going down 100%. So anytime we drop below that, we're saying in alignment with our city values or whatever it is, we are willing to subsidize i.e. give money to the developers to create this thing. And I think that's a really complex conversation to have. I do think as a council, we have shown in our general plan, we've shown in our goals and objectives that we do, that it's important that we have the infrastructure improvements that we want. So I think we'd all say that that's a given. And I think it's just that trade-off. And what I have talked to Steph about, and I don't know if it's kind of outside the scope, what's tricky about it is there are other factors at play here having to do with state legislation that's changing the landscape. So we're trying to make this analysis or calculation about how much we're going to subsidize, but yet the landscape is changing. And so the developers are already getting gimmies, as it were. So it's just, so I really appreciate Steph puzzling through it, but it's one reason why I want us to look at going back to their very original point and the question that Selena asked, which was like having a fee now, because I do want to capture what we need to do the here and now, because I think the complexity of this for the future, it's just going to take more time. I just think we don't even understand that some of the impacts, and you were getting at this with the state law, because if we're already giving away things, being hired or whatever that is, and we're reducing fees or subsidizing the fee, I mean, that's just not, that might not be the right equation or the right mix. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
that the balance is not, and I don't think there's a like, oh, this is the exact right way to
Exactly.
approach it. So I think that leads into the question
Okay.
about phasing. So I am curious about what are the contours of what other municipalities are doing around phasing. I heard a 3-year graduation. I heard a 5-year graduation. I'd love to hear more about how phasing might look.
Phasing, when you do phasing, you can also stop it at a certain level. So let's say in January, you come back with additional fees that you want to update. You can pause that phase or keep going. But I think for jurisdictional wise, Megan might have a little more insight on what other cities are doing to phase in, maybe.
Yeah, so I'm working with lots of cities that, over the last few years that are in your position, particularly when it comes to park fee updates, because land values have increased so much and the costs of park facilities have increased so much. The maximum justified park fees are coming out, pretty high. And so cities are, I think in the past, we're just adopting maximum justified fees for most things. And now I think a lot of cities are in the same position as San Rafael, where they're having to evaluate, from a policy perspective, is it appropriate to adopt the maximum fee? And so they're having to look at these other market concerns, just like you all are. A lot of cities also do the same kind of process where they're doing one fee at a time. So you may not be getting that snapshot in time, as you were saying, of like, what's the full picture of all of the updated fees. And so what they have done is they, frequently will phase in the fee, whether it's, goes up every 6 months or annually, and you start at one point and maybe the goal is to get to the maximum justified after 3 to 5 years. And then as you update your other fees, if you can do a full analysis of all of the city's impact fees compared to all of the impact fees charged by other jurisdictions. It's a little bit more of a complicated analysis, but it gives you somewhat of a snapshot of like, is this feasible for development? If you are way higher than other jurisdictions in terms of impact fees, I think developers might argue, well, that makes it more difficult for me to build my project, or I can't build my project with that level of fees. So most jurisdictions look at that market analysis and try to figure out what is appropriate for your jurisdiction, where you are going to, keep development occurring so that you can collect that revenue, while still trying to, as you said, protect your public facilities and make sure you have enough revenue for that. So if you did some sort of phase in as you update your transportation fee, your public safety fee, you can start to get a more comprehensive picture of what the fee burden might be. And then you can decide if you want to adjust the park fee even down further, or just halt the phases, or continue as planned.
So Megan, on that, thank you for that. No, that's really helpful. But one thing that I was reflecting upon as you were speaking is that there are a lot of other fees, and we only have, and Micah referred to this, we have just this little piece of it and it's the labor markets, the finance, I mean, those could be the elephants and we're just a tiny mouse, right? And when you look at the big fee structure, I mean, are you hearing that as well? Do you understand what I'm saying? That the bigger impacts are from things that we don't control and the numbers are bigger.
Yeah, totally. And there's really two types of market analyses that cities might do. There's the full-on feasibility analysis, which will really look at, and sometimes these are done in the context of affordable housing fees, where you look at land costs, labor costs, borrowing costs, all of the things, like the same way a developer would, and you basically put together a pro forma, and then you back it out and figure out, how high can your impact fees be? There are various issues with that because, like you said, all of those costs are varying. This is just, it will only provide you a snapshot in time. If it shows that development is infeasible, does that mean impact fees need to come down, or does that mean land costs need to come down, or labor costs need to adjust? I mean, that's really looking at so many different market factors that the city doesn't control, that most cities decide not to do that full analysis because
we do that.
it's just too many things outside your control. So the other way of looking at it is to just do a full burden impact fee analysis, where instead of just comparing your parks fees to other cities' park fees, you compare your full fee burden. And then, sometimes you can also, as part of that context, look and see how much, make sure you're including cities that have been seeing development in recent years. So, well, it must be feasible because there, development's occurring there. And so I think that for most cities, they find that to be a much more accurate marketability analysis for determining fee levels.
Okay, we'll do that in
Can I
January.
add one thing to that,
Yeah.
this might have also speaks to this point. It's also a little more complicated. I think for San Rafael, you mentioned these other cost factors out of our control, but even within the impact fee bucket, we don't control all the impact fees, specifically water and sewer. So a lot of it is a function of the infrastructure that's in place to support the development, tends to have lower fees, and we need capacity to bring sewer capacity or water capacity to a project. Those are also fees, but we're not setting them. They're not set by us. So there's a little bit of a gamesmanship like between the entities on who gets closer to max fee, and somebody else, you're almost subsidizing in some ways the other provider of the infrastructure. One last thing I would say, again, anecdotally on the ramp up and phasing in, there are times when cities do this, depending on the market, where sort of showing the full fee and saying, hey, we're coming in at a lower rate and here's our ramp up, can incentivize the development that's on the fence, because it's like, I'd rather come in now and get my project in than wait for a full fee burden. That's in the mix too.
Can we go back to the slide that the input that you need, because I'm watching the time. We have just 15 more minutes. Okay. So the first one, input on the adoption of updated fees at a phased-in approach, start at what $% Can we just say yes? We want a phased-in approach.
Yeah, well, I think too, what I don't want to do is take off the fact that the maximum rate is something that I want to at least be on the table.
Okay.
That
In the
eventually
scale.
it would phase into the maximum ultimately. I think to your point, Paul, I think there is a point that if we create that phase in, it does create inspiration. I use that word. Say, hey, get in now before it gets higher if you want. And also to be clear, because our fees have not been contemplated since the 80s, we're sitting in a place of potential subsidy for the last 40 years. So, I don't think, I do think that going to full in one shot would create other problems. So I'm more in favor of that, but I don't want to take maximum. Ultimately, each of the levels need to be looked at.
And I think when you say it started with dollar percentage, I'm always a fan of percentage versus dollars for all the reasons. So I would be, that's what we'd be looking at. And I fully concur with the council member. I think it's interesting having that full out there, if nothing else. There's also another story that gets told that like, this is the maximum and we're actually not doing that because we want you developer to come on. And I mean, yeah. So, okay. Is that sufficient for bullet number 1? Yeah, okay, so nodding heads. Input a potential resolution to establish a current fair market rate. Yeah, I think this is the fact that our land value, we're using the land value number from what, 1989,
$200,000
what?
for $200,000 roundabout.
Per an acre.
It's not time the town will set
Yeah, I mean, to me, that's one where I'm happy to jump in more to the deep end of the pool on that one. Like, I mean, I'd rather, just saying, we're so out of whack on that.
I think part of the question is there is a range, and maybe this is a question for you, Megan, that the 2.6, is that what came from the Nexus study? But there is a range of all the way up to 6 million.
Yeah, I think given that we have the Nexus study and we're talking about it, here publicly, I think that probably if you're going to go and, adopt a resolution stating what the fair market value is for the purposes of the existing fee, I would do it at the same amount that's in the Nexus study.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what does that make sense to you?
No, it does, and I think my recollection too is that whatever we come up with, or whatever staff comes up with, this is something that would be socialized with various stakeholders, including developer community and other folks. Is that right? Once we come up with at least a sketch or a concept.
Yes.
It would be, but I want to underscore what Megan just said. I mean, the whole point of the Nexus study is to actually use this information so we have a data-driven decision. So
100%.
even though when you go and normalize it, they're gonna be like, what? I mean, let's be honest here. So there's
Yeah.
gonna be a gasp. So I think going at the lower end, not going at the higher end, but I just, it's never gonna be a good time to raise that. So I think we need to do it now. We're starting to explode in terms of the development that's happening here. I
So
mean,
back to the first question, I
Yeah.
think just getting a gut sense from the two of you as staff is thinking about the phase in
Yeah.
and the amount of years. That's also, a factor. So there's a big difference between doing it over 3 years or 5 years or a 10-year horizon. I think staff is somewhere in the middle there. That's the current thinking, but might be helpful to kind of hear what your gut reaction is to that.
Maybe I would punt it back, which is there a way to look at a couple of discrete scenarios of what different, maybe scenarios of really aggressive growth more on the 3-year side and then a 5-year and a 10, just to see, because I think in terms of how we take in fees and the amount of subsidy we're doing, there's going to be a lag in terms of the kinds of facilities we can build for the people that are coming in, and it's going to have an impact on the community. And so I think to have a valid kind of conversation with the community, we need to be able to say, here's what we're looking at, is what I'm thinking. I don't know where you are with that.
Yeah, I mean, depending on the development cycle, which goes and fits and starts, and we're starting to ramp up, and then, well, all sorts of stuff that happens, and now it's slowing down again. So that I'm trying to figure out at this point in time, right? Because that's where we are, are we ramping up or contracting? To me, it looks like, it appears to me that developers are kind of stepping back a little bit. I mean, because of the financing, because the labor markets, tariffs, all these other uncertainties. So to me, the super short I'm not sure how we get, so I guess I'm advocating more for the middle. I think when it gets too long and far out, it gets too theoretical. There are too many unknowns that come in. So I just probably go right in the middle. I mean, to me that.
The other
Yeah.
consideration on the middle is the further we go out, then the Nexus study is outdated, and then we're kind of trying to catch our tail
So
again.
it's really an 8-year horizon.
Okay.
So what is middle?
So you're saying like 5 to 7, is that middle, 4 to 6?
Somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, because I think 2 to 4 is just, it's super fast. And it just seems to me that things are slowing down a little bit. So, but I wouldn't want to be like 9, 8 plus. I think that's too far. So somewhere in there, does that?
Did you want to add anything?
No,
Yeah, I'm watching
it's always a real time issue, because a lot of times the developers are interested in now, right? It's
Right.
It's real money, it's real capital, it's real approach. So the clarity of this, and for me, it's just settling on this. And to your point, every time I talk to a developer about raising fees or adjustment, the answer is always no, that's never gonna work. So so it is just kind of setting that or recognizing there is a great time, and we take this stuff with kind of full understanding that the development community is not looking to add more fees. However, I will say that if you're in the development world and you do this across the country, you're gonna pay, you're gonna pay something related to parks. You're gonna pay something for traffic and sanity. So they already have that kind of formula built in there. The key is to get it kind of within reason and understanding really what it is comparative to market for other deals in your basically competitive building market. So that's why we always look at comparable cities and what's happening within the North Bay and, you know, what's happening within our local jurisdiction. But recognizing we set the tone for Marin. So it is important that we're kind of at least parity with others.
So would you say that, so if we go to the 2.6 million land value, so there's gonna be that big jump right there. Does that change how you think about the timing of the phased in, knowing that they're gonna turn around and get a bigger hit that they don't know about? Because we're gonna change the land value, the formula, we're not gonna change, we're gonna actually have it reflect reality. So does that change the timing? Do you understand what I'm saying? Because we already know that we're gonna be adding that increase. We already know that.
I think it's just clarity of really what it takes to deliver these projects. So even at 2.6 million, from my perspective, that's actually on the low end of the assessed land values for acreage. So for us even to settle at that number, because I'd even press the developers to tell me, buy me an acre of land that's in $2.6 million. Because it doesn't exist. And we've been trading land values of 4 to 8. 4 to 8 million is what we've been trading.
Really?
Yeah. So that's why the land valuation is such a critical factor. That's why we want to move off that particular model. Because we'd rather understand the actual impacts in our park systems versus the land
But you're not
valuation.
doing 4 to 8 because 2.6 is what's in the Nexus study.
Yes.
Okay.
And then the other thing, I mean, just to point out or have staff, I'd love to say something wrong and have you find me. But it's a low bar for a developer just to submit a pre-app and lock in fees.
Well, yeah.
So even, I mean, when I think of medium, I am thinking more like 4 because you could wait a year and still be at pretty low end unless we're graduating at 6 months at a time. So I mean, it doesn't cost very much.
Why would
to
you say,
submit
you're saying
pre-app.
that we would wait 4 years before we would start the increase? No,
No, I'm not saying
Oh, I
waiting.
wouldn't.
I'm saying start immediately.
Yes,
You start
okay.
low and just draw your
Okay,
linear.
okay, I
linear.
agree too. I agree with starting.
Formula.
Right, yes.
But I'm just saying, people can then make their decision like, I'm gonna pre-app ASAP, just so I can lock in.
So I think what you're hearing is we know that staff will take in our input and you'll come back with a really good, well thought out package for the entire council, because it is super nuanced. And I think when it goes to the greater council is, having the context, looking at the factors, the why as to why you got that number. Otherwise, we could all sit in here and go round and round and round and round. But what we need from you all is the why. And I think, your support.
And how it fits into that bigger picture.
Well, the bigger picture thing that we won't know until January, really.
Yeah. But I mean, the framework of these, the balancing and the
Yeah,
trade-off.
yeah.
That's a kind
Yeah.
of framework I'm talking about.
Yeah. Okay.
And just because it occurred to me and I forgot to say it, when the city manager said it takes a minute, I think just in case AI is listening to it, she meant like 6 months to a year.
Excellent point.
Okay.
Megan, how long does it take normally to do a Nexus study, or Micah, about 3 months, 3 or 4 months?
Depends on the data. I mean, Debbie's actually probably best since she's been does these all day long for
Debbie?
Kaiser, so.
Well, it depends, but in this one, the first one, so we started, we had to adjust the service standard, and so I think the next one, it took quite a while for this one, but generally speaking, I would say it's around 3 months, but the next one that we would do for you or anybody would do would probably take less time because some things have been resolved in this analysis.
Yeah, and I would say, generally it's somewhere between 4 to 6 months from the very beginning until the moment that council adopts, just because there's various, like now you have 30-day notice for your public hearing and there's more requirements which require more review. So the Nexus study itself, as Debbie said, might be able to be done in like 2 to 3 months. And then it usually takes like a month to 2 of review and noticing to get it to public hearing.
Okay. Thank you. We know it's not a minute, so thank you for that. There actually is 2 more things on this agenda. Anything else on this one? Okay, so the next item is future agenda items. Right now, we have the next meeting on November 4th.
Which I think is election day. Note if that date's still gonna work. Special election.
Yeah.
That will work.
Oh, Bye. Oh, bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank
Saw you
you.
waving.
Megan was waving, so I'm like,
Okay.
yeah, I think you wanted to go.
Yeah, thank you.
Director Nabazio, I'm assuming we can still do mail-in ballots. That hasn't been made illegal yet.
Right, okay, we can still come here and have a meeting
Yes.
in person. Okay, so that sounds great. Thank you all. There are a lot of brain power in this room, and I know not everyone chimed in, but I know you're all a part of making this happen in the next step. So I see you and appreciate you. And this meeting is adjourned. Roll to the next one. Good job, Selena.
Yes. Thank you.
Committee.
Well,
That's really hard. It's really hard.